PhillyVoice.com is where you can now read Ryan's stuff, and the Phillies spring training is near. And as he writes, a look at the Phillies position player battles. And Ryan, I think it's a good primer because I'm not sure that Phillies fans really know some of the guys who are on this team and who's battling for spots, because it seemed like it was such a, like a recorded record in the past. It was the same 9 guys for years and years and years, but we got some new blood and some interesting battles here. Welcome back, pal. How are you?
Very good, yeah, and thank God on that note, right? I mean, I wrote about the position players 2 days ago, and today I wrote about the pitchers, and, both, it's just kind of a sigh of relief that I'm reading about all these retreads and all these guys who are on the back end of their career and how much longer will they be here, and, why did they sign veteran player X? Now it's like, okay, cool, like, there's some young blood here, there's a lot of prospects, there are guys that are on their way up, so you're getting a chance to see, we'll find out this year, next year, and the following year whether or not any of these guys are major leaguers. But that's fun. That's much more enjoyable than, watching Marlon Byrd and A.J. Burnett and all these guys that are, why are they even here? You know what I mean? So
yeah, no question.
It'll be cool. It'll be great to see all this new blood in Clearwater next week.
Well, and we got a glimpse of some of them last year. They finally gave in and brought up guys like Franco and Nola, and we got to see them. Eichhoff. You actually saw the fruits of some of the labor of some of these younger players, and now they have a whole nother batch of them from the Giles trade and the Hamels trade and some other minor trades like Revere and Utley and Papelbon, where, man, they're going to need name tags down there.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's going to be Carlos Ruiz, Ryan Howard, and really a bunch of kids. I looked at this, I think it was the NHL All-Star game. I was looking at the Phillies. What brought it up is that Jaromir Jagr was playing in an All-Star game, and I was like, God, how old is Jagr and how long, I think he was born in I forget what the stat was. Oh, I know what it was. He was drafted in, I think, 1992, and I went to look on the Phillies 40-man roster, how many Phillies players were even born when Jaromir Jagr was drafted. And there were a lot of guys that were, like a guy like Cody Ashe, for example, who, we all feel like has been around for a couple of years. He wasn't even born when Jagr was drafted. So
wow.
And he isn't the only guy. There's a lot of guys. Obviously, Franco, just go on down. Nola. So, yeah, I mean, you have just so many young guys on the roster. But, again, that's fun. That's and you're right. You're going to need some name tags to figure out who's who. I mean, even I will, because of all the, some of these guys, obviously have been around.
Well,
but yeah, you have all these other guys. So like Hamels trade, I think Eichhoff and Asher are the only guys I've met. So, or I think I should have met Nick Williams. But even still, yeah, there's just so many guys that you're trying to get to know.
Well, and in years past, it was like, Don Brown was the one guy you were waiting for, and now he has, come up, gone, and out. And you write, these names are unbelievable. Michael Martinez, Nate Shearholtz, Ty Wigington, Hector Luna, Juan Pierre, Delman Young, Ezekiel Carrera, Casper Wells. These are just some of the names who have patrolled the outfield for the Phillies in the meantime here. But what is the outfield looking like in Clearwater this year? This should be a very interesting battle out there.
Yeah, it should be. And, the thing is that it's a very, what takes the field on April 4th in Cincinnati on opening day won't necessarily, be what takes the field in September, when they're moving in even further into the rebuild. So, a guy like, I would say right now, obviously a Duval Herrera, you can pencil him in somewhere in that outfield. I think he did enough last year that he will have a starting spot. But after that, there's going to be a lot of competition. I mean, you have one player on the way up, like Aaron Altair, who came up last year and had a pretty good showing for 6 or 7 weeks. And then you have another guy like Cody Ashe. It's probably his last chance to prove himself as someone that can be in the everyday lineup. And then, you have some new blood. You have Tyler Goodell, who wasn't any of the trades, but he was a Rule 5 guy. And he's a very toolsy guy. If you look at his skill set, he can run, he has power, and he hits from the right-hand side. Those are all things that are very attractive to the Phillies. And he can also play center field. And then you have Peter Bourjos, who's really a defensive specialist. The bat really hasn't shown a whole lot yet in his major league career, but he's still young. I think he's maybe 29. So you have a lot of guys out there, and there's not necessarily one guy who's going to jump out and besides Herrera, that I could say for sure will be in that starting. Nick Williams, he's one of the guys that won't be there April 4th, but, probably will be there on September 4th. So, he'll join the big league roster at some point this year, and, he's a big part of their future, I would say. So, yeah, what that outfield looks like in March is going to be different what it looks like in, at the end of the summer. But even still, it'll be fun to watch all those guys compete. And even William could be out there in spring training, so he'll get a chance to impress and to show what he can do, too.
Ryan Lawrence with us from PhillyVoice.com, covers the Phillies. Ryan, this is Pete Thompson talking to you right now, and you mentioned Borges is one of those names. I can remember a couple of years ago that he was the guy that blocked Trout from getting to center field. Trout had to play left field because the Angels had Borges sitting in center. So I guess my two-part question then is defense is his strong suit, and if that's the case, do you see a situation where maybe Borges is in center and Herrera is in left?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the Phillies, that question's come up a couple times this winter, and Klentak seems to be, both Klentak and McCannon seem to be open to whatever, and they obviously know what Borges can do out there. So I think that's a very realistic possibility. If Borges is going to be a regular in the outfield, why not put your strongest defensive center fielder in center field, kind of like they did last year? I mean, this time last year, we all just considered Ben Revere was the everyday center fielder. Well, Odubel Herrera kind of took that spot over. So, if they think Borges can hit enough to play regularly, then, yeah, I would think that he could, command that position in center. And then Herrera, maybe plays left, right. I would think left is probably more suitable for him. So, yeah, I mean, really the great thing is there's competition everywhere. I mean, there's only a few positions – there might only be one where you could say a guy's going to be locked in at his position all year, and that's Franco. Beyond that, there's competition everywhere, and everybody kind of has to keep proving themselves, or they're not going to, they're not going to keep their spots. And then that's Herrera only has 1 year of major league experience, so it's not like he's that entrenched into that center field position.
But he'll always have that catch at Wrigley, right?
Man, two catches.
That's right.
He has
the no-hitter.
He had 2 catches in that. He had 2 of them. He had the ones at the end of the no-hitter, which we all remember because he bobbled. But I think it was just an inning earlier. It was either the 7th or 8th inning.
Right, the
he had
diving
one. Where
one.
He kind of dove toward left field. I mean, just unbelievable. Yeah.
Ryan Lawrence with us. PhillyVoice.com is now where you can find Ryan's Phillies coverage and spring training. What about J.P. Crawford? He's obviously, he's become like the new Dom Brown, where he's been around for a couple of years, and now I've seen him up to number 4 in some MLB minor league rankings. I know the Phillies are in no rush here, but do you think that the fans, they were clamoring for Franco last year. They finally got him full-time in the middle of last year. Do you think at some point that Crawford's time will be this year?
Yeah, I would think at some point this year, but I don't think there's a rush. And just a couple things. He just turned 21 in January, so this is a kid that's a little younger than a couple of the other guys mentioned when people are clamoring for. And he, only just hit Double-A. I think like last June or July, where last year Franco had already had experience in AAA, I believe. So yeah, you're looking at a guy that's a rung lower than those other guys. He isn't quite on the cusp like those guys were, but close. And in the skill set, we'll get him here sooner rather than later. I would think that maybe August would be kind of a time to see if he gets up, because I think September call-ups are obvious. If a guy shows enough, you bring him up in September because the rosters expand. But, if this guy's proving himself down there and is that just playing lights out down there and can, obviously looks like he can do it offensively and defensively at the major league level, maybe you bring him up for a longer look and you see what he can do over the course of 2, maybe 3 months in the big leagues. And that way he has that confidence going into his first full season in 2017.
Ryan, one of the pictures that Mike Gill and I had, I think I put it up as my Throwback Thursday today, like the 08-09 era. There's a picture of Mike and I and Cowboy Joe West. And I think back to, when the bullpen was like the bridge to Lidge, right, and how you had everything set up at that point. The Phillies haven't had that convenience and that lock in a while. How do you see the bullpen battle shaping up, and who do you think could end up being the closer? Because there's really no guy you go, yep, that's the guy.
Yeah, I wrote about that today, and the bullpen is that I wouldn't say it's a weak spot. There's just a lot of that is the place where there's just a lot of clutter or cluster. There isn't. I think Jimmy Cordero, who I don't think will be on the big league roster come opening day, But he's the one like that you could look at and say, wow, like future stud. I mean, he threw 104 miles per hour this winter in a game. He told me he was clocked at. Last year he was clocked at 103. I mean, this is a guy that throws 100, pretty easily. It just, it just comes naturally. So he's the guy that could say future closer, and he could probably be in that bullpen at some point this summer. But beyond that, I mean, I would say the closer favorite is David Hernandez. He's a guy that, his name won't jump out to anybody, and everybody won't be like, wow, great. This is the guy that I'm psyched to see. But he was a guy that did close some games for Arizona a few years back when J.J. Putz was on the DL. The following year, he had a great strikeout rate. But then he had Tommy John surgery. So I think March, he'll be 2 years removed from Tommy John surgery. And usually that's a pretty good, if you're going to come back from Tommy John surgery and you're going to be yourself, 2 years is a pretty good, recovery time. Usually 1 year you're back, and then the second year you're back, meaning your stuff plays up too. And they signed him to a major league deal, unlike some of the other guys they brought in, like Andrew Bailey, a South Jersey guy. They signed him to a minor league deal. They signed Ernesto Ferreri to a minor league deal, and they signed Edward Mujica all to a minor league deal. These are all guys who've been closers in the big leagues and have had some success, but they're all going to be in camp in the minor league deal where David Hernandez was given $3.9 million in major league salary. So I think that's another reason that I would say Hernandez is a favorite. And then those other guys are competing too. It should make spring training fun because it's kind of a wide open position. I would say Hernandez is the favorite, but I'm not saying a heavy favorite. It'll be interesting. And I mean, the one thing to note too, and as I wrote in my story today, is that who the closer is on a team that's probably going to finish last place or second to last, and with 90-some losses isn't that important, but it is for the players because they can all establish themselves. It's a big role, whether you like it or not. So yeah, those guys like Bailey and Ferreri and some of those guys that are trying to reestablish themselves, you can sure bet that they'd like to be a closer again because it helps their career moving forward.
Well, and not only that, Ryan, a team that struggles that has a decent guy in that spot, he could be trade bait at the trade deadline, and you can get more prospects. Last one for you, Ryan Lawrence, Phillies beat writer at PhillyVoice.com. The Phillies rotation, there's no more Hamels, there's no more Lee, there's no more Halladay. They're all gone. Fresh faces everywhere. It used to be who was going to be that number 5. How many spots are up for grab in this rotation?
Yeah, it's funny. Even though that there isn't, I wrote about the line I used today was that that opening day, that rotation, the guy that most likely is going to have the most starts in a Phillies uniform is Aaron Nola, and that's kind of crazy when you think about it. I mean, he's the guy that only came up late July. But even with that said, they did get 2 veterans this winter in Jeremy Hellickson and Charlie Morton, and those guys will be in that rotation. Those guys are kind of bounce-back type candidates that could be trade bait in July, but also guys that will pitch innings and take the pressure off some of those young guys so you're not pushing those young guys too much. So those 2 guys will be in the rotation. Nola will be in the rotation. Jared Eichhoff will be in the rotation. I think all 4 of those guys are very solid into the rotation right now, barring health or just disastrous springs. And then so really it's like one spot that's open, and I think it'll be between I guess Adam Morgan will be in the mix a little bit. People kind of forget about him. I mean, he has decent stuff for a lefty, but I would say the 2 guys they acquired in the 2 of the guys they acquired in the Giles trade, Brett Oberholzer, who's from Delaware, and Vincent Velasquez, who's a right-hander with a really big arm. I would say that those 2 guys are the favorites for the 5th spot. And Oberholzer probably a slight favorite over Velasquez because he's out of options, so they can't send him to the minor leagues. They could put him in the bullpen. So, but yeah, I would say between those 3 guys, Adam Morgan and Oberholzer, with Oberholzer probably getting the slight edge as a lefty who has been a starter. He was a starter with Houston last year, so he's a guy that has some major league experience.
All right, Philly spring training, a couple of weeks, pitchers, catchers next week. First game on the 1st of March against Toronto. All of these battles will start to unfold. Ryan Lawrence, PhillyVoice.com. Bookmark his stuff there. And I know you're probably, I know it didn't turn out the way you wanted, but you had a nice little end of the winter there with your Clemson Tigers making that run. I was following you along. So you had a nice little downtime there.
It was fun. I went to both games. I went to the Orange Bowl and the National Championship game, and they had a great showing in the championship game. Blowing out, and you even say that they outplayed Alabama in 2 of the categories, in offense and defense, which is special teams that kind of bit them in the butt. But Yeah, but I'll be down in Clearwater too. So you guys, check in down there. I'll be down there.
Cool. Well, Rye, it's always a pleasure. It's good to have baseball back, and congratulations on the new venture.
Thanks, man.